Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Our Fighting Forces number 123, and this was a 1970 DC war comic, and it features the first episode of the ongoing war series, The Losers. I think there was an appearance of these guys in GI Combat. I guess people wrote it and liked it, and so a few months later, they give them their own series. It's kind of a weird group book, because all of these guys, Captain Storm, Johnny Cloud, Gunnar and Sarge, and I guess Pooch. Pooch is gone now, but it used to be Gunnar and Sarge and Pooch, their dog. They all had separate series in the DC War comics. I guess they were mildly successful, not successful enough that they were going to continue. So what they did is they put them all in this group. They figured, okay, we got all these kind of like second run war heroes. What if we put them all together? And maybe it'll work. And it did, because the Losers were published all throughout the 70s. There's quite a number of stories about the Losers. Start off with a beautiful Joe Kubert cover. And this is a total example of how Joe Kubert is so good at that less is more, school of drawing. When you look, see all these Nazis, he drew every single one, even back here. But when you look closely, it's just like a dashed off, quick flick of his wrist with the brush. It's so simple, but it reads so well as all these soldiers. They look so great. But when you look closely, it's like, oh my God, they have no faces. It's just like a quick slash mark of the pen. So pretty interesting how what a genius Joe Kubert was. I mean, he was just pretty masterful at this point. First story is Cold, Deadly as a Bullet. This is written by some guy named Howard Liss. I am not familiar with his the name, but I assume he did some stuff for Robert Kanigher. But more importantly than that, it's drawn by Russ Heath. And this is like all throughout the early 70s, Russ Heath was drawing the most beautiful stories in all of these war comics. This is no exception. This is some really nice stuff. So we're basically in the European theater, World War II. It's freezing. And our protagonist, this guy, Joe Martin, he hates the cold. All of his thought balloons are basically him whining about how much he hates being cold. And this sucks. So his platoon is pinned down by a German machine gun nest across this river. So his lieutenant says, Joe, you got to sneak behind them and throw some hand grenades in their nest. Take care of them, because we can't cross this river until you do that. So Joe's not even scared about running into enemy fire. He's just, all he can think about is how damn cold he is and how he hates it. He's almost happy to get to run a little, hopefully bring up his heart rate and get a little warmer. As he's running across the river, he falls through a soft spot in the ice. So it gets even worse for him, because he's in the water. It's freezing as hell, as you can imagine. The Germans see him start firing, and so then he totally submerges into the freezing water. And the whole time he's just like, this is so horrible, I can barely make it. Like, it's just pure willpower. He swims to the shore underwater and comes out where the ice is thin. He's behind the Germans' line of fire. So he throws the hand grenades into the nest and takes care of the Germans. Man, I love this panel so much. You could totally tell that Roy Lichtenstein was probably licking his chops wanting to steal this image. But I mean, for all I know, he might have. This could be hanging in the Whitney right now. I don't know. But also just the colors. This is amazing looking to me, this panel. Just beautiful. I've talked about this before, how I just love the colors in these late 60s, early 70s DC comics in general. They're just amazing. Like, look at this sunset here with the limited palette they had to deal with. But they're, trying to do interesting things. And the printing's so much better than when I was a kid. I guess they had steel plates back then. By the time I was a kid, they started using the plastic plates. But the colors are just so striking and solid. Like, look at the blues here, just total solid color. So I guess they know that the Germans are going to come back and try to retake the position that they just fought for. So they can't even have a fire. They have to wait in the dark for the Germans to come. And, of course, Joe was just like, oh, it's so cold. And we see a flashback to when he was a little boy. That's a great drawing of that little kid. He grew up in Nebraska, and even then he hated the cold. Always hated the cold, and it was always the bane of his existence. So now the Germans show up, and they're attacking from all sides. And the Americans are pretty overpowered. So this one German's attacking Joe, and he drops a potato masher, and it explodes. Joe's not hurt, really. He's just kind of knocked out for a sec. And he lands in the snowbank. And it's snowing so fast that he's pretty much covered within a minute or two. So he's like, the Germans have totally overrun our position. All I can do is play possum here. Hopefully the snow will cover me and they won't see me. So it works. But of course, he just has to stay totally still. And he's getting colder and colder every minute, literally just packed in snow. And of course he's thinking, oh, I feel like I'll never get warm again. I can't feel my toes or my fingers. So the next morning, reinforcements show up and they counterattack to try to take the position back from the Germans. Joe wakes up and just through pure willpower, he can barely move his fingers. He pulls the pin on this grenade, takes out this nest, and then starts firing at all the other Germans. And the Germans are totally surprised. They're just like, there's a guy behind us shooting at us. What the hell's going on? So with Joe's help, they retake the position. That's a great drawing right there. It's great. His face. Sorry, I forgot to mention too, this is another panel that should be up on the wall of the museum. Roy Lichtenstein should have stole this one. It's so great to me. The colors just really just jumps out of the page. So now his lieutenant promises that, guys, we got to do one more thing. We got to take this town, which is, the Germans are in control. After that, we get 3 days R&R. We're going to have hot showers, hot chow, and warm beds. And from then on, that's all Joe can think about. He's basically like really fired up. He's like, God, we got to take care of these Germans as fast as we can. They're not going to keep me from a warm bed, he's really fired up to get these Germans. And so I guess there's this cabin, and the Nazis are inside shooting at them, so they're pinned down. So there's no way they could run fast enough across this open field to take out the Germans. But they see this Jeep, and Joe and the lieutenant jump into it. The lieutenant's driving, and the lieutenant gets shot pretty quickly, and the Jeep swerves off the road, knocks Joe to the ground. Joe's crawling towards the Nazis, and they fire at him and they hit him. But he is so incentivized by, being warm. He's just like, even though he's dying, he's crawling close enough to the cabin to throw a hand grenade in. He says, I'm coming, Kraut. You're all that's holding us up. And then we cut away after the town is secured. And we see these two soldiers, and one of them saying, so long, Joe. At least now you're not cold anymore. And that's how it ends. I read this last night. I was like, whoa, that's pretty bleak. Like, I thought for sure Joe would have made it. But, this is around the time when Joe Kubert took over the editorship of all the war titles. And he was definitely trying to make them more realistic. He even had the saying, make war no more at the end of every comic eventually. But, man, that's a pretty bleak story. Just another great panel by Russ Heath. God, that motherfucker had chops. So good. Here we have a one-pager called Warrior. DC war comics would always have these like one-page kind of historical filler pages. Sometimes they'd show you like how a certain kind of machine gun or a certain kind of fighter plane. But sometimes they do great military figures from history. So this is written by a guy named Raymond Moraes. Never heard of that guy before. And it's drawn by Ken Barr. And Ken Barr, you might know that name. In the 70s and 80s, he was a pretty popular paperback cover artist. Did these beautiful painted covers for a lot of books. But around this time, he was doing a bunch of war stories for DC. I think he might have done some stuff for Warren and Skywald. But he did a handful of stories. And then I guess people realized, he realized, he's like, I'm a damn good illustrator. I don't have to get this chicken feed pay from comic companies. I can get way better money from the book publishers. So that's what he did, and he never came back to comics. But here we see he's a pretty good artist. It's a very dark Napoleon there. That's very shaded. So this next story is drawn by Ken Barr and written by Robert Kanigher, longtime DC war head honcho, basically. And this is so weird how the story starts. So up until this issue, Our Fighting Forces, the main feature was Lieutenant Hunter's Hellcats. And I don't think I've ever read anything of theirs. So this starts like another Hellcat story. And it says, Exit Laughing. That's the title. And this is weird. The Hellcats have a female member? And I think it's World War II. So it just kind of doesn't really make sense. I'm curious how they have a female soldier in World War II in their patrol, in their platoon. So they basically, we come in on the story. It's kind of the climax. It looks like they've just taken care of these Nazis and they're ready for their R&R. But the lieutenant says, we got to find guys to take our place before we get to relax. So then it turns out we're introduced to the losers. It's not a Hellcat story at all. It was like a fake intro page. And we see this rest and rehabilitation area. And first Captain Storm comes up to the desk sergeant, says, hey, where's my new papers? I've been here for months. And he's like, I don't see your name on the list. And then Gunar and Sarge come up. Sans Pooch. I don't know what happened to Pooch. I'm kind of worried about him. But same thing. They're like, your names aren't on the list. You got no assignment. And same thing happens to Johnny Cloud, the Native American fighter pilot. And he's not on the list either. And then, man, I love this logo here. Introducing the born losers in no medals, no graves. That is sharp looking. Great lettering. Just great all around. Love that. So Captain Storm's thinking to himself, is like, why shouldn't the brass forget about me? I lost a whole PT boat and my whole crew. Man, sometimes Ken Barr overly shades. It's a little much. It looks pretty good, though. You could definitely draw. And then Gunar and Sarge, apparently they have the same sob story. They lost their whole patrol. And Johnny Cloud, he was a flight leader, supposed to look out for his pilots, but he lost too many pilots. And so they took away his flying squadron. Then they proceed to have a total pity party and talk about how, yeah, we're all a bunch of losers. And I guess Gunar and Sarge knew each other when they were kids. Apparently they grew up in the slum. And They had rats for a company. That's a pretty big rat. Johnny Cloud's all like, oh yeah? Well, I grew up on the reservation. We lost our whole country when you palefaces moved in. And then right then, finally, the Hellcats arrive. And they're basically like, you guys are going to be our replacements. We want some R&R now. And they say, what have we got to lose? These guys have actually been bored being in R&R for so long. They want a mission. Also, this begins, or it continues. Robert Kanigher loved repeating stuff. He loved repetition. And God, almost every page, one of the guys says something about like, what do we got to lose? I guess we're just a bunch of born losers. It just keeps happening. So they're flown to England. This general tells them that about the mission they're going to do. He introduces them to this guy named Howard, and it's the exact double of Captain Storm, even down to his wooden leg. And the mission's kind of crazy. He's going to take over Howard's spot in Germany. He's like a secret agent there, and the Germans know who he is, and they want to capture him. But he's going to take his spot, his place. He's going to basically let himself be captured by the SS, let himself be interrogated for exactly 48 hours. Then he's going to collapse and give false information to the Germans. That's the plan. He says, why can't the real Howard do it? Why do I have to do it? And the general's like, well, actually, he's just been holding on until he could find a replacement for his mission. And now that he's seen you, he slumps over. He's dead. Pretty dramatic timing there. And now he's dead. Pretty good art there. So the other guys and the losers, they're going to be a diversion. And once again, I got nothing to lose. Once again, I got to point out just the colors. Look how solid that green is. This blue over here is so solid. What have we got to lose? Again. So they fly Captain Storm over enemy territory. As he's parachuting down, he sees that the plane that dropped him off is instantly blown up by another plane. He's like, oh, I guess my bad luck has rubbed off on the poor pilot in that plane. I gotta say, I like the losers. I have a bunch of their comics. They're pretty fun, but they're the whiniest bunch of characters in comics. Every issue, they're just like, when am I gonna catch a break? Why is everything against me? We're born to lose, I guess. So he floats down right into the Germans' clutches. And I like this how the general said this earlier. He says, you'll be taken to Grim Castle on Vulture Mountain. It's like, yeah, overlooking Mummy Meadows and Dracula's Forest. It's just so foreboding. And so now we see Grim Castle at the peak of Vulture Mountain. And we see the head SS guy. He's actually called the Vulture. And you can't wait to start torturing him. He's, for some reason, suspects that it might be a double. So to make sure, he shoots him right in the leg, where his wooden leg is. He's like, oh, I guess this is the guy. So he's pretty lucky. I mean, they could be pulling out his fingernails for 48 hours, but all they do is put him on this kind of crane. He's in this very frayed net that could snap at any moment, and they hold him over the precipice. Which, I mean, it's not fun, but all he's got to do is sit tight for 48 hours. So he holds out for that time. And then he says, let me out, I'll talk. Commando's attacking at dawn. That's a really nice drawing there. It's a good face. And sure enough, Gunar, Sarge, and Johnny Cloud come floating down on parachutes. The diversion. So as soon as they land, they just start causing havoc. They land on this bridge. They jump on this train. They kill a bunch of soldiers on the train, then blow up the train. They find this airplane. They kill all the guys around it and hijack it. And they fly to, what is it called? Vulture Castle? Grim Castle on Vulture Mountain. In the region of Foreboding, Germany. So they land the plane right near where Captain Storm is being hung over the precipice. And the Vulture is all like, cut him down. But they throw a bunch of grenades down. And one of the grenades knocks the Vulture right off of the cliff. And he's holding onto the wrist of Captain Storm, but he slips and falls to his death. It's kind of weird. Usually this would be reserved for sound effects. There's no word balloon. But I guess Ken Barr developed this thing when people yell or, scream or something. He says, hang on, I don't want to lose even you. Captain Storm's yelling at him. But it's drawn as if there are sound effects. Slipping, help me. And the guy falls. Just want to point that out. I've never seen that, really. Kind of weird old comic technique. So, like in most war comics and war movies, all these Germans are terrible shots. And they're all firing at the losers, but the losers safely get Captain Storm into the plane and fly off. And they're not wounded or anything. And as they take off, the Germans are still firing at him, not hitting a damn thing. And then, of course, the last panel, they're like, we're all just born losers, Sarge says. So there you go, the first chapter in the Born Losers saga. Man, I wish Ken Barr stuck around and did more comics. He's pretty good. A lot of DC comics around this time would have like the gag page, or half a page of gags, just to fill up space, I guess. These are by John Costanza, the letterer, longtime letterer. And these are military gags, but this one is basically just making fun of fat people. And we see this guy in the back of the bus, and the bus is tilted. And the bus driver's saying, somebody get that fat guy up front. I mean, that's the level of humor here. Not very good. And the letter page. I like this one letter. I just read a wonderful letter in Our Fighting Forces number 120. And I agree with this woman 100%. America is truly a wonderful place in which to live and work. I'm glad someone else feels this way too. Terry Ann Judd, 14 years old. She probably went on to vote for... Oh, I guess she was too young to vote for Nixon, but... vote for Reagan, I guess. So that's it, guys. Our Fighting Forces number 123. I hope you enjoyed it. I have a soft spot for these DC war comics. I got quite a collection. It's kind of a big part of our special collections, our DC war comic wing of the Academy. And I want to get more, of course. But I'm building it up pretty nicely. I'll be showing a few more off, in a while. I'll give this a rest for a little, but hope you like looking at these comics as much as I like flipping through them. And also, I hope to see you next time here at the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.